My name's Carl Catafias, and today, for our episode number 5 at Genealogy at the library, I want to talk about what's in a name, what's in our names. And a lot of times, researchers are so focused on, well, names, but dates, places. They tend not to take a step back and to really study the names within their family histories. Names are something we all share. In our last 2 episodes, we dealt a lot with the federal census. In fact, the entire 2 episodes were of the federal census. And it was just pages and pages and pages of names. The way to look at our names is our names, we all share this commonality. However, even though we have this universal item, this universal tendency of names, the most fascinating thing is how individually unique every one of our names are. And that's going to be the focus of this particular episode. I wish we were able to meet in person, because this next, if you want to call it an exercise, it can't be homework because you're not going to turn it in to me, but this next exercise, I just want to do a little bit of an experiment. So, as we see here, we're going to see if we have any future census takers out there. What I'd like you to do, if you don't have it already, I'd like you to go grab a pencil, a pen, some scrap paper, and if you don't have them on hand right now, we'll wait. We'll take a little bit of time. Let you go get it. You almost want the Jeopardy theme going on here. Doom, 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 doom. Okay, you're back. I will be saying 11 names. I'm going to try, sometimes that is, to give a particular ethnic spin to these names. And all you have to do is write down the names. Write down what you hear. After saying all 11 names, we're going to go and check what you've written down compared to the actual spellings or the proper spellings of the names. So let's begin. And you can number them or just leave them spaces in between, but here we go. Your first name, Jorge Bergoglio. Jorge Bergoglio. Number 2, Charles Lawton. Charles Lawton. Number 3, William J. Blyth. William J. Blyth. Number 4, Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm. Number 5, Joaquin Bottom. Joaquin Bottom. 6, Yvonne Cornoyer. Yvonne Cornoyer. 7, Cristobal Colon. Cristobal Colon. 8, Stanley Lieber. Stanley Lieber. Number 9, Eldrick Woods. Eldrick Woods. Number 10, Isur Danielovich. Isur Danielovich. Might give you a little bit of time for that one, a little bit long. And finally, the last one, Elena Mironov. Elena Mironov. There you have it. Here are your 11 names. Let's see how you do as census takers. So as we go, you can actually just go down your list and see how you did with the spellings. So the first one we start here, Jorge Bergoglio. But you know something? You know him better as Pope Francis. Charles Lawton, the old actor from the 40s, 50s. And I wonder how many of you, if you didn't know Charles Lawton, maybe this could have been Lawton. Possible. Our next name was William J. Blyth. Pretty straightforward. However, we know this individual as Bill Clinton. Shirley Chisholm, one of the first African-American congresswomen to serve in Washington, D.C. Joaquin Bottom. You know him better as Joaquin Phoenix. If you know hockey from the 1960s, you know how good the Montreal Canadiens were, you know who Yvan Cournoyer was, one of the best forwards to ever play in the NHL and an NHL Hall of Famer. Cristobal Colon. Everybody knows this guy. 1492, hint? That's Christopher Columbus. Stanley Lieber. Okay, all you Marvel comic folks, you should know this one. Stanley Lieber? How about Stan Lee? Eldrick Woods. The name, last name should be familiar. Eldrick? We know him as Tiger Woods. Now the last two, Isur Danielovich. I'm just going to say one word here. Spartacus. Those of you who know the old-time movie, who comes to your head? Yep, Kirk Douglas. And finally, Elena Mironov. Helen Mirren. You notice something with these particular names? Not only the spelling, which I would love to go over with you and see how many people got them all correct, how many got 9, 10, whatever, but to see how many of the names actually changed, that their birth names changed. And that's something that I want to deal some time with, to spend some time on with you here in this presentation. You know something? We really had no choice in our names, unless we did something to our names specifically later on in life. Because, in all honesty, we were born into our surname. You know, when our parents had us, the surname was already there. We were just born into it. Our first and middle names were chosen by our parents. Now, they may have been influenced either by their parents, their relatives, their friends, whoever. So we really didn't have any influence on our first and our middle names. Some of us have nicknames. And if we do have a nickname, it was given to us by others. We really didn't come out and say, "Hi, I'm Carl Catafias. My nickname is," so-and-so, but it was through our mannerisms, maybe our resemblance to something, maybe a contraction or a variant of our names, whatever the case may be. Our nicknames were given to us by someone else. So the person, the name that we maintain has been given to us, has come from other people. One of the presentations that I always loved to do when we were able to come into the library and do live presentations was something called Surname Scrabble. And I did the spelling test, but another little option that we had during the presentation was a story. I would read a story, and here it comes. Anne and Robert, sometimes called Hab, had a son and named him Henry after the king. They lived in the village of Bosham, owned by Andrew Follott, Lord of Boxham and Sheriff of Oxfordshire. The family lived in a house just south of the church on a small hill near the west boundary. Robert was the town's reeve or overseer, but died when Henry was only 4 years old. Anne was forced to work at the Lord's oven for the villages to make a living for herself and Henry. After a while, Henry was apprenticed to Walter, the village tanner, to learn a trade. Question. So, what could Henry be known as? Henry could possibly take on these following surnames. Possibly Robert, Roberts, Robert's son, Hob or Hobson, Reeves, Boxham, Oxford, widow's son, because Anne was a widow, and Henry is the son of the widow, so widow's son, a baker, apprentice, tanner, just to name a few. This is how surnames came about. There were certain reasons why people were named as such with their surnames. I would love to travel back in time to our first direct ancestral surname and see what reason existed to be called that particular surname. And I would love to pose this question out to you as well before we get into this, when I was creating this particular slide. If you were given the opportunity to spend an hour with a past relative, one past relative, who would you choose? Now again, that would be something that it would be great to interact with people in the audience, and maybe somewhere down the line we'd be able to do that. But I would really like to have you just think on that. Maybe put it in the back of your head and just think about it. Who would you like to sit down with in your ancestry for an hour? And just one of your ancestors, and who would it be? Let's get into the surnames. There were many reasons why people were called what they were called. For example, the color of their hair, skin, or complexion. A surname with the name of Fairfax. If we trace the meaning of Fairfax back, it actually means fair hair. So the individual could have very light, wispy hair, thus the name Fairfax, or possibly Whitehead. An individual with early graying hair could be named Whitehead. Peculiar build, a body build, or a peculiarity. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Neil Armstrong, Martin Short. All those surnames fit into that particular category. Was Martin Short's ancestor on the, maybe he was short, maybe he wasn't as tall as other people in the village, who knows? Physical, quote-unquote, defects. The last name of Calvin, John Calvin, most noted. Calvin actually means bald. So really, I could be called Carl Calvin, but I'm not. Another one, Faust. Faust actually means there was a deformity in one of the individual's hands. Mental and moral character. This one's easy. Goodhart. That's an easy one. Physical action. Well, Walker, Lightfoot, Gordon Lightfoot. And this next one goes hand in hand with our next category, a resemblance to animals. I found this to be really a bit fascinating. The last name was Rat, R-A-T. Yes, it does refer to that particular animal. However, it also refers to a very agile individual. So maybe a person with the last name of Rat, maybe he doesn't have mousy features. Maybe he was just pretty fast and agile for his time. And sticking with the animals, Nightingale. Okay. Vogel. Vogel is actually a German word for a bird. Low means lion. Occupations, that's an easy one. Many a time an individual was related to their particular occupation. So you have Smith, possibly Baker, Taylor, something of that nature. Occupations. And finally, geography. Jack London, Peter Lawford. Specific locations in an area. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a specific location all the time. For example, Lavalley, Lavallée, Lavalley, which actually means of the valley. So as one traces that surname back into France or French Canada and places them in a geographical location, there could be a valley involved in their area somewhere. Just to show what kind of information you can get on a last name. Here you see my last name. The origin is of Polish origin. And the root of that, my surname, is K-A-T. Kat. That word means executioner. Now, this was found in Polish Surnames and Meanings by Hoffman, which we have here at the library. Another word that we have in the English language is katafalk. And a katafalk is a stand. And it's used in funeral services, the stand upon which the casket is placed upon. with those two clues, I am under the assumption or the belief that possibly one of my ancestors may have been an early undertaker or possibly the official executioner of a particular village or area back in Poland. I'm not sure, but from the last name, from the roots, that leads me to that particular belief. It's something that I have in my family history. It's not written in stone, but it's just a novel thing to have out there. Another thing I do is I always jot down different spellings of that last name. And to date, I have 61 variations of my last name. And these are just a few of the variations. These were found on the federal census. They were found in birth records, in marriage records, in death records, not only in the churches, but also civil records. I found them in newspapers, and every time I find a different, or if I find a variation, I always make sure I write down where the information came from. It's citing the source. Some of these, you can see, are pretty straightforward. Cataphias. Yep. Misspelled exactly as it sounds. Some of these are a little bit different. For example, this one here, the KTFIAZ, which came off a federal census, got rid of quite a few vowels in there. Okay. Some of these other misspellings, once you pull up the microfilm or the record and view it yourself, you can actually see that the census taker at times did in fact misspell the last name. However, there have been times where the indexer, that the person who is inputting this on Ancestry, on MyHeritage, on Family Search, actually saw something different than what was actually there and guessed that particular spelling. But here's two of my favorites. Ratifius. Okay. I will give the indexer leeway here. I pulled that up on a census record, and yes, a K can be misconstrued for an R. I get that. So, okay, I'm going to give this guy a pass. The next one I tell at all my beginning sessions, and that is the gold medal goes to codfish. CODFISH. As I said before, always cite where you get the information from. And this came from the 1880 Toledo Lucas County Census record. My great-grandfather, his wife, their kids, including my grandfather, were listed under John Codfish. Not Cataphias, Codfish. So I can only imagine what the census taker heard, because if I would say my last name with a Polish variation, it'd be Katafiasz. It's still not codfish. So did the census taker happen to go have a couple of sips somewhere at a neighborhood beverage place and then continued on with the census? Did he not like taking Polish names in the Polish settlement, and this was just his way of, well, I'm just going to write something down? Don't really know. But now, for eternity, my ancestors were codfish. So, if you do in fact decide to make a name like this, again, always cite the source, cite the website you got it from, because there will be a time where you will want to go back and try to look at and say, what were these people thinking? Oh my gosh. This way you have it right at your fingertips. You can just type it right in to your record there. Katafiash, Katafias. It's a very unusual surname. As you can see, the spelling variations are a challenge. However, there is a benefit to that particular unusualness, because if I happen to find another Katafias, it's a pretty good chance that I could tie this person, male or female, somewhere into the family. On the other hand, a common surname, Smith, Jones, Brown, I get you're going to get tons and tons of results. That's great. The challenge there becomes sifting through all of those particular records and find the specific line that leads into your family. As you go back in time, you will see that there are a lot of John Smiths and Mary Smiths and Joseph Smiths, and they all have a tendency of crisscrossing dates and places. That's going to be a challenge, and it's very important for you to follow the correct line to your proper ancestors. But no matter what, whether you have an unusual surname or you have a more common surname, always, always be open to variations in the spelling. Don't just simply dismiss something because it's not spelled the way you spell it. It could very well be that this misspelling was simply misread, misheard, something. Never dismiss it. Always investigate it. We go back in time, federal census, 1900, 1890, 1880, and many of us came from across the ocean, or many of our families came from across the ocean and settled into the United States. And one of the greatest challenges to us researching today is being comfortable with this: the different variety of alphabets. When our ancestors came over from Scandinavia, they came over from Russia, they came over from Eastern Europe, from Southern Europe, Hungary, Greece, Yugoslavia, Austria-Hungary. Each language had their own alphabet. And these alphabets, each letter had their own specific sound. So if you were Polish or Russian or German, it's important for you to have something like an alphabet sound chart as you try to decipher these particular surnames. What was that sound? What did you hear? On my mother's side, my mother's maiden name, Hudzinski. Hudzinski. Pretty simple and straightforward. However, in Poland, it is actually Chudzinski. The census takers, officials, public officials, when my ancestors spoke that particular name, even though they spelled it CH, the officials heard only the H, and that's how the surname came to be. The entire C was dropped off. But if I am researching back in Poland, I have to make sure that I have that C reattached to that surname, because without it, I'm dead in the water. So I encourage you that if you have a Polish name, grab a Polish alphabet. If you have a German name, grab a German alphabet, a Russian name, a Russian alphabet, and so on and so forth. It is going to help you out in the long run and to make it easier for you to figure out variations of spelling. Maybe some of you are wondering, I wonder where my surname falls into the United States. How many of us are out there? Pay close attention to this particular website right here. So www.census.gov/topics/1990_census/1990_namefiles.html. This particular website is a fascinating website. And what the census people have done is they've created lists. And the list is showing frequently occurring surnames from the 1990 name files. And here you will see the top 60 names from the 1990 census. Well, I don't have to worry about my name being there. Top 60? Yeah, ain't no way Cataphias is up there. But as you can see, Smith, Johnson, Williams, Jones, Brown, Davis, Miller, Wilson, Moore, and Taylor, the top 10. Go and visit this particular website. Another treat that you'll find on there is they also will list the most frequently occurring girls' names and boys' names in the 1990 census. That was pretty cool too. So it gives you something to look at and just to have fun with in your research. Oops. Hello, my name is, well, it was, and now it's name changes. We saw them before in your little spelling test, right? What prompts someone to change their name? And these are just some of the reasons. It might be difficult to spell or pronounce. Story has it that one of the names that was being thought of prior to my birth was Christopher. So, Christopher Cataphias versus Carl Cataphias. Don't know how it was decided, but story has it that my parents thought Carl would be easier to spell for me than Christopher. So I got the 4-letter first name. They didn't change Cataphias, though. They changed they gave me an easy first name, maybe to make up for the last name. Another one, to avoid ridicule. This would be if our ancestors were coming into a new town, a neighborhood, an area. And it could very well be that their location, their house, well, maybe they didn't like a certain kind of immigrant coming into that particular area. So in order to avoid any trouble or ridicule, thus the change. Anticipated a bias based on religion or ethnicity. This is something that my dad experienced quite a bit. In Toledo, there were 2 Polish areas, Kuszwans and Lagrinka. And in between, my dad was from Kuszwans, my mother from Lagrinka, and for him to get from Kuszwans to Lagrinka, he had to take a trolley, walk, and it was through a German neighborhood. And, well, sometimes there were incidents where they didn't like him traveling through the neighborhood, and by the time he showed up at my mom's house, well, he was a bit disheveled. But love lasted. They had my sister, they had me, so it all worked out in the end. A desire, a break from the past. If you can recall the name list, Joaquin Bottom, and it turned into Joaquin Phoenix. Just a short little story that his father actually, in coming to the United States, decided, we're going to have a complete rebirth. We're going to just start from scratch. We're going to start over. He dropped bottom and took the name Phoenix. Phoenix, rising from the ashes. So there's some symbolism there. So it was a definite break from the past to start anew. Easier to assimilate in a new community. My cousin contacts me. I need some help with this particular individual. So I do some research, and it wasn't a direct ancestor, indirect ancestor by the name of Cataphias. This family starts in Toledo, moves west to Indiana. The next census, find them in Kansas. The census after that, find them in Chicago, Illinois, but under the name Daly. Now, what reason would possess someone to change their name from Cataphias to Daly? Very easy to assume. He wanted to assimilate into that particular neighborhood. So he didn't want to be considered an outsider with a Polish name, so he went with the Daly last name. How do I know that that's him? As I followed his trail via the census, it was easy to keep matching the wife, numerous children, and seeing the ages. That at this particular time they were this old, their next one they were 10 years older, and thus, and thus. So this migration from Toledo west back to Chicago, Cataphias, Daly. The need to assimilate. And finally, the last, well, it's personal. Don't really know that. That's why oral histories come into play. That's why we have to communicate with our past ancestors and our relatives. Here are some of the tendencies. A translation. The name changes because Kupier becomes Cooper. Wawrzyniec. That's a tongue twister. A lot easier to say Lawrence. Select a name with a similar sound. Heinz, H-E-I-N-Z, becomes Hines, H-I-N-E-S. A little more Americanized. Sledge, S-L-E-D-Z becomes S-L-E-D-G-E. Nachtigall. Nachtigall becomes nightingale. It's simply a translation. Drop certain parts of a surname, so Storstrand becomes Strand. Papadakis becomes Pappas. Or we change the name altogether. Mueller becomes Johnson. And Cataphius becomes Daly, which I related to you. Here is a quick search. I'm looking for Smiths, exact, and I want to know the Smiths from Germany. The first thing that pops up is from Ancestry, S-P-E-I-T-H. When you look at that particular record, the indexer for Ancestry saw this particular spelling and not Smith. When you pull the record up, there is some crisscrossing of the lines. Yes, you could see where she gets that misspelling from, but if you really take a good hard look, it is Smith. Here we have August Smith from Germany, and we're going to be going to Multnomah, Oregon. So we're going to go visit here. Okay, here we have August Smith, and he is from Germany. Let's look at the record. This is probably a name change since August cites being born in Germany. Thus, Smith could be Schmidt, possible. Was the name cited in the census as such because that's what the enumerator heard, or was that what he was told? That's something we don't know. It would be continuing our research under the Smith name and then under the Schmidt name. But there's more information there. August's first marriage, but it was Florence's second. Because if we take a look here and here, we see that Pearl and William are cited as stepdaughter and stepson. Florence's first husband was born in Ohio and died in Oregon, since both Pearl and William are born in Oregon. So if we go back to Pearl and William, their father born in Ohio, their mother born in Michigan, which ties in with Florence. Always read into the record. There might be clues there that you can utilize. Please remember, there are no specific guidelines or precise formulas to decipher your surname changes. Always close your eyes and say the name. What do you hear? Write that out. See what kind of variations you can get from there. Place yourself in your ancestors' time and place. That will allow you some variations. When you're looking at your surnames, there are a couple of resources. There are surname dictionaries, surname atlases, Polish surnames, English surnames, Welsh surnames, Italian surnames. There are books out there. And these books can be viewed via two particular websites. Number one, you already know the one, which is FamilySearch.org. You go up to search, click on books. In the search box, type in Polish surnames, English surnames, Scotland surnames, anything of that nature, see what pops up. Another website that you definitely want to look at is this one called Hathy Trust. The website, hathitrust.org. Hathy Trust. This website is committed to downloading and making accessible old digitized books, resources, and materials. This is another location that you can use in order to search for surname information, family genealogies, county histories, city histories, anything of published nature that might be available to you online. It's worth a shot. Really easy to use. You would simply type in what you're looking for, click catalog, full view only, click search, go have fun. Our first names. Our parents more than likely had our first and middle names all picked out long before we were born. Some of the logic behind our first and middle names, well, it could have been the name of a past ancestor or ancestors of direct or indirect lineage. It could be a name of a person that influenced them or they looked up to. You know, sometimes, especially during World War II, when we had the big baby boom after World War II, there were a lot of kids that were named George and Douglas, Dwight. That was because the GIs looked up to these individuals. The names sounded good together. That's possible. And they're influenced by family and friends. Or for a whole different reason that's known only to them. So you really need to ask them that. Why was I named that? Why did you give me this name? I already know Carl. Well, I already know the Joseph too, because that was my mother's father. Baby name books abound. And so if you are actually looking for the meaning of your first name, you could go to the public library and look at any of books of this particular genre, because they will give you the meaning of your first name. We're going to do a little what's in the record here. And we see here Isaac Davis, this being from Toledo, Ohio, Lucas County, the 1910 census, and individual right here, his name is Isaac Davis. Okay, that shouldn't be any big deal. However, when we come over and look at his nativity, where he was from, he's listed coming from Russia and Yiddish/Jewish. So it's probably that Davis is not the actual given name back in Russia. What could it be? That is going to be very important in this person's research. We take a look at the children's names. Here's Edward, Goldie, Pearl, Fanny, Rose. I think that one might be Maurice, but again, the legibility of the census record. So Davis is more than likely not Isaac's original surname. The children of the Davis and Steinberg families may refer back to a past relative. We can see here's Bernard Steinberg from Russia with the same Yiddish and Jewish. Up here Davis, but the given names of the kids that may refer back to a possible ancestor. However, Goldie, Pearl, Fanny, Sadie, Molly, Blanche, are those the real given names? Don't know. Maybe that was something that they were just called and not the real given names. And what about those middle names? You know, the sole purpose of your middle name was to indicate when you were in trouble. How many of you can recall growing up and your parents, when they used your middle name, you knew you were in trouble? That when that got put together with your first name, something was up. And if your parents, your mother, most of the time would open the back door and shout out your name outside trying to call you in, whether you're late for dinner, you may have been the first name first for a few times, but when that middle name got added, you knew you had to put down what you were playing, tell your friends goodbye, and hightail it back to dinner before you even got into worse trouble. The middle names, where did those come from? Quite possibly, as in my case, as I said, to honor my mother's father. There's probably a connection that way as well. So take a look at those middle names too. Nicknames. Nicknames are the most essential in life. They're more valuable than names. Just thinking about that, nicknames, like I said, do come from other people. So it's how do you get these particular names? We don't have any choice in our nicknames. Again, they're given to us by others. So look back on your childhood. Look back on your friends. What were their nicknames? What was your nickname? Growing up, I had there was JJ, there was Von, there was Rob, or Robin. High school, not so much. In college, let's see now. There was Bogey, there was Ziggy, there was Millie, there was Stashu. I went to a Polish college. Stashu? Yeah, Stashu. Shab, Mouse, Donuts, Bruno, Red, Wojo, and even the teachers got nicknames. Father Peshko for Peshkowski, Father Rock. His last name was Rakoczy. He was also our assistant basketball coach, and the reason why he was called Rock is if you were cutting across the zone and you weren't paying attention, he would just stop in your way and you would hit him. And this priest was so built, you would drop to the floor, ergo Rock. And he'd do that not only in college, but also to the high school football and basketball players too. So, many a nickname in my life. And what's your nickname? And how did you get it? I don't know. Don't have a clue whatsoever. Well, I sort of got it a little bit. Who knows why Gertrude becomes Sabina, Dwight becomes Little Ike, Alexander becomes Sandy, Christopher becomes Kit, John becomes Fritz, Margaret becomes Peg, Caroline becomes Callie or Carrie. Where does this come from? Nicknames could be based upon any or a combo of the following. Sort of follows the same line as our surnames. Physical characteristics, personality, portions of names, skills, abbreviations, Americanations, phonetics, drop letters, combos, contractions, modifications, all those made the nicknames. Nicknames. These two lists were taken from the Observer Obit Index that we have available on the library's website. We've taken and made basically a directory, an index, listing all the obits from 1950 and we have them up to the present. And they're pretty straightforward. However, when we take a look and see that they're also referred to by the following. Henry becomes Scott, William becomes Earl, Grace becomes Joan, Joseph to Pat, George to Geordie. Okay, that isn't bad. W. Rupel to Ruth, Conrad to Connie. Wait a minute. Conrad, male name. Connie, first thing we think of, that's a female. Unless it's Connie Mack. Okay. Julia to Lolly, Lucille to Pat, Morris to Duke, Lewis to Fred. Some of these nicknames, how did they get there? Why were they called that? And the only way to find that out is to ask your ancestors. Where did these names come from? They're going to help you out in the long run. And you know something? With the census, don't even get me started on the census. Just to show you what I mean. Just for the heck of it, and you can do this too. I just happened to go into Ancestry and decided to just look for people. But I didn't put a last name in, I just put a given name or a first name, and I used nicknames. So you see up here, you see Skippy. Well, there are 158 Skippies. And if we come down, Tank, 1,517. Carp, the fish, yep. 1,704. Knife, the utensil, 1,357. Sedan, four-door car, 321. Tiger, 1640. Here's a good one that I just happened to pull out. Bologna, B-O-L-O-G-N-A. Yes, there are people with that name listed in the census. How many of them? 48. Look up Ham on your own time. You're going to find them. It's amazing there. Mustard, the condiment, 196. Maybe you want some mayo with that. You type in mayo, 26,000. 26,000 with mayo. That's a lot of mayo. And finally, Slim, a little over 2,000. It's just amazing how a nickname can not necessarily take the place, but be sort of interchangeable with a formal given name. And you might run across that in your research. In one census, you'll find the formal given name, and the next census, the person will disappear, but you'll find another name such as this. Again, you'd have to look at the record, have to do the research, and get that information. Nicknames for 100. Nicknames may change in time due to the surroundings and the people. Personally, in grade school, I used to love the Minnesota Viking football team in the 1960s. They played out in the snow, the Purple People Eaters. And one of the defensive linemen on the Purple People Eaters was Carl Eller. So whenever we played football, a very good friend of mine, JJ, who I mentioned before, that was my nickname, Eller. In college, it was Cat, okay? And it's not that because I looked like a cat, it was real easy. K-A-T, my last name. They simply cut it off, and that's who I became, Cat. Even the professors would sometimes call me that, okay? Beyond that, in my teaching days, there were a couple of teachers who I became very close with, and in our little inner circles without students around, we had nicknames for each other, and one of those that stuck with me was, well, Special K. Okay, well, I don't know how special I was, but that's one of the nicknames. Nicknames tend not to be permanent fixtures on the person. I don't think I have anybody running around calling me Special K here at the library, and I know I didn't have it back in Monroe, so. Not everyone was given the right to call someone by their nickname. I remember doing homework when I was in grade school, and in the dining room table, sitting there, and we had the phone right next to the dining room table. Phone rang, and I picked it up. It was my Aunt Joanne, my dad's sister. Hey, Aunt Joanne, how you doing? A little bit like this. And so she says, I want to talk to your dad. And I just nonchalantly said, oh, you mean killer? Well, my dad boxed early on in his life, and that was his nickname. And when I spoke that to my aunt, I got the biggest talking to from her, putting me in my place. After that being scolded, I handed the phone to my dad. They continued their talk, and he basically pulled me aside and said, you know something? Yeah, don't call me that anymore. Okay, I get it. I was, sorry. Call me Dad, Pop, whatever, but, don't ever use the nicknames around any of the relatives. Okay, I got that one. Not a problem. It was highly frowned upon for a child to call a parent by his nickname, their nickname. My mother's nickname, my mom's name was Leona. Her nickname was Lee. Never called her that. Never. I learned my lesson through my Aunt Joanne. My dad always went fishing every Saturday. He would get up early, go out fishing with became his best buddies. His name was Carl Schwartz. My dad and he developed such a friendship that they called each other by nicknames. Carl Schwartz called my dad Killer or Polak. My dad would call Carl Schwartz either Schwartz by his last name or Dutchman. But they bonded that way, and it was okay for them. And on the occasions that I would be invited out to go fishing with them, let me tell you, it was Mr. Carl, Mr. Schwartz, unless Mr. Schwartz told me I could call him by a certain other name. But it was only with his permission. Never did I do that on my own. Finally, there is no one resource to discover the origin of an ancestor's nickname. That can only be done to research nicknames through family oral history and stories from the older relatives. So there you have it. Names. Last names, first names, middle names, nicknames. Our names are more than just what's written on records. The names of our ancestors, direct or indirect, mean more than just that ink. Because those names are more than the script, they are persons. They are personalities. And it's through their combined personalities that we've become us. Keep that in mind when you're researching your ancestors. With that, let me give you a quick glimpse as far as what our next episode is going to be. So, episode 6, we will be talking about the genealogy sources in the state of Michigan. I will be talking and mentioning libraries, archives, state and local government, genealogical societies, historical societies, and databases. The resources that I will be looking at and talking to you about newspapers, vital records, photos, oral histories, clippings, newspapers. There's a lot out there. And even though it's going to be the state of Michigan, others can use this methodology to search other states and see what is available to them from other states. So until I come to you again, I want to wish you the very best in your research. And since we just changed to the new year, I want to wish each and every one of you a safe and healthy, prosperous 2021. And let's keep our fingers crossed that very soon we'll be able to come together, and maybe then I'll give you that surname test once again and we can score them inside and really see how good you did. So until we meet again, take care. Thanks for stopping by. See you soon. Bye-bye.